When these two toxic Instagram influencers attack a smaller account just because she chooses not to Photoshop her body in her pictures, she gives them the best life lesson possible. Two entitled influencers told me to edit my content and got a nice lesson in life. I am a 27-year-old woman. A year ago, I decided to become a content creator. And even though it was hard, my platform is now taking off. For context, I was interested at first, but I didn't know how to start. And my cousin, who is a 28-year-old woman, was the one who gave me the push to become one. So, I decided that my content would be about body positivity, exploring my country, Puerto Rico, food, travel, natural beauty, and curls. It's been tough, but in a year, I've managed to gain 2.4k followers. It's still growing, and while many people see that as a small following, I am happy with that. And I've got compliments from people telling me that they love my content since I don't edit or Photoshop anything from my body. I don't edit anything. I let the world know that even though I have stretch marks, cellulite, saggy breasts, dark spots, and acne scars, I do not edit that since I don't want to follow the norm on Instagram about creating an illusion about myself. I will admit the only times I do edit photos or videos is in nature because I want those to stand out. So, 2 weeks ago, I was invited to an influencers event, and I was more than happy to attend since I'd be staying in a hotel room near a beach that I was dying to take shots in, and I gladly accepted. I take my photos with a tripod since I like to be alone while I explore. So, the event of the day comes, and I was happy about my room since I had a balcony with a view. I met all the big-time influencers. I got to say, some of them were nice, but others were stuck up. They think they're better than anyone else since they have about 800k or 900k followers. The nice ones gave me advice about not changing the way of my content and even started following me. But the stuck-up ones just snorted. I ignored them since some of them even expressed that when they started, they only had 1k followers in a year. I got lucky or blessed, I don't know. So, while we all got dinner, two of these stuck-up influencers, 40-something-year-old men, saw my content and expressed that I should edit out all my flaws since many people would be disgusted with my body. And another one, a 24-year-old woman, expressed that many men want to see a perfect Instagram girl. You know, girls with long hair, very feminine, makeup, and the one thing I hate the most, photoshopped or face-tuned. And they don't want to see one with flaws, and that my content won't get me anywhere. They both said this while they had a smug smile looking at me. There was a silence at the table, and my cousin, the one that motivated me to become an influencer, glared at them. I wanted to cry or lash out at them, but I decided to be honestly cruel. I smirked at them and told them, while you are entitled to your opinion, I love that my content is real and shows I have a real body and don't follow the ridiculous beauty standards, and I could show you the amount of DMs of people loving that I keep it real and love that I make nature stand out, but I don't care about giving a fake illusion about myself. They glared at me, and I told them that I'd be taking my leave since I do not like keto dinner, and I found a place nearby to eat quesadillas, and I wanted to see some new murals as well, for photos because that wall looked amazing. I left, but my cousin, her fiance, and some influencers followed me. And let me tell you, we all had fun without those toxic others. The next day, I put on my best bikini, took my tripod, and took the best shots on the beach. I put them on Instagram, and let me tell you, I received praise and also likes from those influencers that loved my idea of my content. That was the last day of the event, and these two entitled and spoiled influencers glared at me because they saw my post and saw that I hadn't followed their advice. To say that I left with a smirk and them both giving me the dirtiest glare was a chef's kiss. OP, good for you. There is nothing I hate more, I agree with you, than people online just being fake. It annoys me more than you could believe, trust me. And just like you, the very worst of the worst in my opinion in terms of being fake online and portraying something that you're not is people on Instagram that literally Photoshop their faces and their bodies. It's so bad and it's so negative and potentially harmful as well. So in terms of what you're doing and what you're saying, fair play to you for sticking with your principles. That seems to be the entire point of your account in the first place. So to change that just because some idiots are telling you to would have been very silly. So fair play, sticking up for yourself, doing what you love, and by the way, what is a lot more healthy than what they're doing, most likely. My parents enabled my little brother's mini bike mayhem with my mini bike. When I was 17, I bought a used mini bike and used it to get to and from a part-time job. Those who've read my previous posts know what my little brother is like. The boy my parents extra coddled because he was diagnosed as a high-functioning autistic. And anything I had, my brother had to have too. And if I refused to give it, my parents generally took it. At least until that behavior was exposed to the public when my parents tried to cancel my 14th birthday. Guys, if you haven't seen that story, link is down below in the description and behind the I button right now. It is just so good. One of my most favorite recent posts. Anyway, after that, my parents stopped forcing me to give my stuff to my brother whenever he wanted it. And that led to some huge extra tantrums for him. My brother would look for things around the house to throw on the floor and break. Usually dishes. My parents actually stocked up on plates from secondhand stores because of that. When I got the mini bike, my brother was upset I wouldn't ever let him ride it. But he's destructive with all his stuff. Every time he broke his BMX, I'm the one who had to fix it. Change a flat, new pedals, new tire, new handlebars, new brake line, etc. He's got a stunt BMX that he begged for, and my parents spent hundreds on it. But as much as he loves it, he never fixes it himself or properly takes care of it. He just calls me over, begging me to fix it. My parents got him the parts and have the tools, but he never bothers to do anything more than pump a tire. And even then, he usually tries to get someone to do it for him. He's also very careless in where he leaves the bike. He left it in a neighbor's driveway, and its handlebars got run over by the neighbor's van. He somehow destroyed the pedals and a new pair had to be put on. He broke the rear brake line while having a tantrum too. The tyre was understandable since those were out, but it wasn't hard to swap it, and I shouldn't have had to come over on a Saturday to do it when my brother is perfectly capable of doing it himself. So, dang right, I'm not letting him take my mini bike on a joyride, especially with gas prices being so high these days. The mini bike gets like 60 miles to the gallon, so what that it only goes 40 miles an hour, I only have a 5-mile commute anyway. About a month before my brother's 14th birthday, my parents called me begging me to come over and fix the BMX again. Little bro had worn the rear tire down to its threads. I was annoyed, but I came over anyway because they offered to pay me. I swapped the tire and sat down for a bottled water because it was like 100 degrees that day. My brother watched me work on the bike till I was done. His helmet was on, so I figured he was just waiting to go riding on his bike. But the moment my back was turned, I heard my mini bike start up outside and then take off. My little bro took off like a rocket down the streets on it before I could get out of the garage. I freaked out, but my parents tried to play it off. Though when I didn't placate them, they said they'd get my mini bike back right away. But for them, that was more like just waiting until my brother came back with it. I was annoyed and I wanted to call the police, but I'm not sure if they'd call it a domestic issue or not. My brother finally came back an hour later. He'd somehow not crashed. But the moment he saw me, he took off again. He drove the bike till it ran out of gas and my parents had to go and get him. To say I was furious was an understatement. But my parents basically rolled their eyes, handed me $40 and claimed it wouldn't happen again. I said it better not, or I'd call the cops next time. I'm not sure if it would help, but they seemed to take my warning. I had to push my mini bike to the nearest gas station to fill up before I could go home. Before I left, I told my parents that if my brother wants a mini bike so bad, then they should get him one. But then they pulled a 180 and said he wasn't ready to have one because it's a big responsibility, and that it was too dangerous because it's practically a motorcycle. I mean, really, they just let him steal mine for like 2 hours to go joyriding to God knows where, and they don't want to get him one themselves? Whatever. I'm used to the hypocrisy by now. The last time I went to my parents' house, my brother was massively grounded and in his room for his birthday rampage I mentioned in my first post. But just to be sure, I pulled the spark plug wire off my bike before I entered the house. My brother was glaring at me from his window when I left. I just gave him a goofy wave and drove off. Guys, if this is the first video or podcast of mine that you've ever watched or listened to, then you may not have heard of this person before, and their, quite frankly, disgusting younger brother. But this is probably the 3rd or 4th story I've read from this user, and they're all just fantastic. So yeah, as I said, I will leave some more in the description down below and behind the I button right now if you are on YouTube. But wow, once again, never failing to entertain is your little brother. I mean, seriously, the audacity of your parents is what is crazy. And I do say this every single time. It's not actually your brother's fault. Yes, he's a horrible little troll, but it's your parents who have raised him and allowed him to be so entitled. So that is where I would point the blame. An entitled father tried to get me kicked out of the store for having big breasts. So, the only reason why the entitled parent in this story didn't go to prison was because I was 18 at the time. But the fact that this happened the way it did still angers me. When I turned 18, I started working at a call center and often walked around the city a lot in order to avoid my toxic mother. Yes, I know what you're thinking, but I was safe and always had a form of self-defense. I was young, but not stupid. Anyways, that year I experienced another growth spurt and went from a C cup to a double D cup. And I was getting a lot of weird looks when in public. As much as I hate to say it, I was pretty young and naive, so I never thought it was because of the way my body changed. But I prefer to keep my distance from people. One day, I decided that I was going to go to Walmart so that I could pick out some yarn for a crochet project I wanted to work on while at work. We were allowed to crochet as long as we didn't avoid the calls that were automatically answered on our systems. While I was checking out the yarn, I noticed a kid who looked like he was 13 or 14 standing at the end of the aisle watching me. Thanks to my history of getting bullied and beaten up, I immediately grew cautious and started debating if I wanted to get my yarn here or go to the Hobby Lobby across the parking lots. Before I could make a decision, an adult man came up and started leading the son off. So I started to relax and think that I was overreacting. That is, until the entitled dad of this story came back. Excuse me, but where did you get your implants? They look so real. Excuse me? I was really embarrassed and shocked, and I was already getting creeper vibes from this guy. Your implants? He waves his hands in front of my breasts and gets uncomfortably close to me. Where did you get them? I was at a loss for words, and I didn't know if he was serious or just being a creep. At this moment, the kid came up and poked at my right breast, and I instinctively smacked his hand away, not caring that he was a kid. Excuse me, but you really shouldn't do that, especially to a woman. It's not polite, and it's considered SA and SH. The entitled dad immediately got mad at me and started screaming at me to not touch his son. He said that it was my fault and that if I didn't want attention like this, then I should keep my fun bags put away. I was in tears and looking around for an escape, especially since the more the entitled dad yelled at me, the closer he got to me. He started telling me that there was no way my breasts were real and that he needed to feel them to know for sure. He even told me that I needed to let his entitled son touch them so that he could learn the difference between implants and real breasts. Wow. Remembering the fact that I had my pepper spray in my bag for any occasion where I needed to defend myself, I usually had a knife too, but that seemed a bit extreme in the heat of the moment, I pulled the can of pepper spray and told them both to step back and get away from me. At this point, an employee turned the corner, having heard us yelling, and saw me holding the pepper spray. He freaked out and called for a manager before coming up and yelling at me, demanding to know what I was doing. Thanks to me being in tears, the entitled dad was able to butt in and started lying to the employee that I was seducing his son and pulled my pepper spray out when his dad had tried to come to his son's rescue. The entitled son immediately started agreeing with his dad, and the employee was already saying that he was going to call the police, while the dad demanded that me and my big breasts get kicked out of the store. Thankfully, at that second, one of my co-workers, a big burly guy who often gave me a ride at nights after hearing that I took the taxi home at night because my mother refused to teach me to drive, rounded the corner, leading a manager right to the mess. The manager demanded that everyone shut up and calm down, and when we had, he turned to me and asked my side of the story. I told them how the entitled dad insisted that I needed to let them feel my breasts to see if they were real, and how I'd already explained that I wasn't comfortable and didn't want their attention. The dad then backtracked on his story, trying to defend himself and his kid, saying it was all for educational purposes, lying that I'd agreed beforehand. This is when my co-worker got mad and pointed at the camera at the end of the aisle, reminding them that it would have caught everything. The entitled dad and his kid both went silent for a moment before making a break for the exits. The manager took off after them, yelling at them to stop, and my co-worker berated the employee for threatening me the way he did. Of course, the entitled dad and entitled kid got away, and I never went back to that store by myself per my friend's request. Please, teach your sons to respect women and don't harass them. Plenty of us are insecure of our bodies and don't want the attention our bodies attract, and we appreciate it if you don't make things worse for us. Also, never assume that a woman's body is fake or that you're entitled to touch it. Oh, honestly, stories like this are just sad, aren't they? Because you just know that this dude is setting the worst possible example for his son. Like, I'm sorry, but is that not SA? It is, right? He tried to touch your breast. If that's not assault, I don't know what is. I mean, it's getting there, isn't it? You know that this kid's going to grow up, right? And he's going to just do the same things that he's seen his dad do in places and events like this. And he's going to think it's okay because his dad does it. Again, not the kid's fault for being entitled, but the dad's by a mile. What a creep. What a disgrace of a man. I don't really understand what you said at the start of the story, saying that he would have been arrested if you were under 18. I guess that's what you were saying. But he should have been arrested anyway. It doesn't really matter what your age is. Like, I'm sorry, but he's demanding to touch your breasts to know if they're real or not. If that is not the biggest creep you've ever come across, wow, what a disgrace.